Christine, hello. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Hey, Alan. Yeah, great. Thanks. I don't do well in the cold, but actually, today's not such a bad day.
It is chilly out there, I have to say. It is not warm, but you don't live in the UK for the weather, I don't think. But, there we go. I was really looking forward to getting on a conversation with you, knowing a bit about you and a bit about your background and some of the work you do. But for those who are less familiar with you, let's sort of go back to some of the early stages. In fact, let's go back to the beginning. You obviously are deep in the trenches in the entrepreneurial world, but how did your interest get sparked? What is the origin story and how you got going initially?
So my first venture into entrepreneurial, I can't even say the word now, into being an entrepreneur was actually quite unconscious. I was very young. We were very poor. We needed more money in our household. I figured out a way to bring more money into our household. That was it. I didn't think of it as entrepreneurial. I just simply thought of it as filling a need. And to be honest, that spirit has always kind of been there. I've always been someone who sees opportunity. And trust me, I have seen opportunities, grabbed them and fallen flat on my face more often than I've succeeded. I left school at 16, wasn't really suited to formal education. I then spent 3 soul-sucking years in a bank, which taught me everything I knew about not being in a job that literally kills you, kills your spirit. And then I joined the Navy. And whilst the Navy doesn't seem like an obvious entrepreneurial environment, what it did do was it really dialed up some of my skills in terms of that seeing opportunity, particularly seeing ways to make things better, to make things easier, to make things smoother. So I learned a lot of process and systems work in the military, but also about being able to see the big picture and actually look at outcome, look at the goals that we were trying to seek. And then when I left the Navy, I qualified as an accountant because I knew that would be a gateway to working in business. And from a young age, I always knew that I really wanted to work in a business. I didn't really want a job. So finally, when I qualified as an accountant, I went to work for a family company. It was the best apprenticeship for a newly qualified accountant that you could ever get, because the job description had 2 lines: keep us legal, which as an accountant was boring stuff. So the first thing I did was systemize all of that stuff. Right. And then find ways of adding value to this business. And I remember in my interview saying, what do you mean by that? And the guy who interviewed me, the group FD, said, I don't know, you're a smart girl, you'll figure it out. And at this point I was salivating, because it was literally everywhere you looked in this business, there was opportunity. And what that turned into was an opportunity to bundle up this business that had been family owned for a long time and actually sell it. So it was the ultimate apprenticeship in exit, because we put parts of the business into liquidation. We acquired businesses to build on to existing businesses, to package them up for the big sell. And we did that over 4.5 years. And I loved it. I loved the roller coaster of the journey. And also I felt very privileged, because not many business owners actually get to go through that journey. And the minute that I left that business, and I literally switched the lights out, I was last person out of the office. I had a nice redundancy check, which I had to write myself. And I took that redundancy check and I started my first, what I call grown-up business, and never looked back.
Fabulous. Now, you've said a couple of points right from the off there, which I think are worthy of pausing and reflecting on. One is, you said, and this is pretty common, I find, you said you weren't really made for formal education, left school at 16, and then you went and worked for a bank, and to put it mildly, didn't enjoy it, which again is, fairly traditional, traditional parents or grandparents, people would tell you, yeah, go and get a safe job in a bank. And none of that really sort of inspired you. None of it was really sort of getting you going in terms of your kind of being inspired, trying to do good things with your life, and obviously at a very early stage. But then you qualify as an accountant. Now that to me is a form of formal education. I've never done it. And the accountants I know are pretty smart and they know their way around tax calculations and complex spreadsheets and things like that. But it seemed to me that once you'd identified almost a reason, an incentive for the it was outcome driven. I presume
Yes.
you weren't really that bothered about learning the basic, the rules about tax planning, but you knew it was going to be a tool to enable you to do what you felt is more likely to be your career at that early stage. I think that's quite an interesting one. Once we identify what it is we truly want to be, then we'll find a way of getting there. We'll find a way if there's a shortcut or if there's a better way of achieving that, as opposed to, don't get me on my high horse about the things that are wrong with formal education as it is, and kids leave school without any
Yes.
real sort of clue about what they want to do. They know algebra or geometry, but in terms of being well equipped for modern business life or life in general, open to question. So I think that's quite interesting. So you qualify as an accountant, and then what sort of business was it? That's this family business. What line of work did they do?
Because it had been built up over multiple generations, it was an amorphous mass.
Right.
So these guys had started out as construction. They were building houses and commercial premises. And because they were in the Channel Islands, they struggled to get materials to the Channel Islands. So what did they do? They bought a boat and they started to ship stuff themselves. And then they had capacity on this boat. So they started a haulage and logistics company to fill the boat. So everything was driven by the ultimate get materials so that we can build.
Right.
And then, by the end of it, they owned part of a shipbuilding yard in Australia.
Wow. Yeah.
It was, and then they were selling these really high-tech ships, fast, high-speed ferries, catamaran ferries, quite unusual-looking things, and they were selling those all over the world in partnership with the people out in Tasmania. So it was this just. They were opportunists. They saw the opportunity and then thought, how can we make that work? And that literally dialed into my psyche, because I couldn't believe that I couldn't believe I got paid to work in this environment. Now, that's not to say it wasn't tough, because, I went in as a baby accountant with only about 4 or 5 commercial years experience behind me, because before that, I wouldn't say that bank was commercial experience. That was an experience in crushing your spirit. And then 5 years in the military, which wouldn't obviously seem commercial.
Sure.
But there was no limits. There was no, you people like you can't do this. Yep. And I remember meeting the audit partner, and he was waiting for someone else to join the meeting. And I said, no, I'm it. The most junior accountant in the whole business. And he said, well, what am I supposed to do with you? And I went, well, I'm managing the audit. And I didn't know that was unusual, by the way.
All right.
So
yeah, that could be a good thing, can't it? Ignorance is bliss. You say, what are you surprised about?
Yeah. And I think because even though I was so junior, the audit partner didn't understand why I had such high expectations of his performance. And I remember the audit manager, finally saying to me, we've never seen anything like that. Well, I don't know any different. So, yeah.
Yeah, that in itself is really good when you come in with a fresh set of eyes. And sometimes, businesses can be very tired. They've been around for a long time and it's sort of, this is the way we've always done it this way. And you come in and just say, well, I think there's a better way, because you're coming in just sort of with a younger, fresh approach without all the kind of legacy thinking. I think that could be a good thing. So with this, once you were brought in as part of this strategy to build it towards an exit, was that the idea? Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was absolutely. I didn't know it at the time, because it wasn't expressed in those terms, but that's exactly what was happening.
Okay. And so that's indeed what did happen. And they sold the business, hopefully successfully.
Oh, yes.
You were made redundant. You wrote yourself a redundancy check, switched the lights off, and then went on to your next adventure, which was what? Where did you go after that?
So I started my first business, which was in the care home industry, nursing homes. And at the time, legislation was coming in for new regulations. And that combined with the industry was full of cottage industry, mom and pop shops that actually didn't really want the legislation to come in and were terrified by it. And so lots of people were trying to get out, and there wasn't an obvious exit route for them. And when I saw the legislation come in, I just got the legislation and I read it. And it felt like a rule book. And I thought, well, this is easy. They're telling me exactly what needs to happen for me to run an effective care home. They even had financial models. And I'm still amazed to this day how many people just didn't pick up those financial models. So I did a feasibility study. I built a business plan, realized I didn't have enough money. So I went to a few people that I'd worked with in the previous business that I'd now left, managed to whip up £1 million, and then went to the bank and said, with this £1 million backing, would you please lend me 6 million? And the bank said, yes. In fact, all of them were falling all over themselves, literally throwing money at me.
Interesting, because I don't know. I mean, times seem tougher now in terms of raising money from banks or from anyone. Was it sometimes industries or sectors can kind of be in fashion? Was this, I think, at a time, these sort of care homes and privatizing healthcare and care in generally was a sort of part of a government agenda? So there was money being generated.
Well, so there was two things that really went in my favor. One of them was the new regulations. Yeah. So it was easy for the banks to see that they were lending to performing businesses. Yeah. And the second thing was, again, I didn't know this was unusual, but I just wrote a really good business plan. And it wasn't all fluffed up and puffed up and made to look brilliant. I put an honest effort in. Yeah. And people, the bank managers just saw it. I mean, one bank manager said, I have literally never seen a business plan like this, because it was 15 pages long. It told me everything that I needed. I could literally just slide it under the application form, sign it off, and give you the money tomorrow. That never happens. So it was just preparation.
I mean, that again is interesting. I speak to a lot of startup founders, owners, and the business plan's almost kind of dismissed. It's 5 pages. We did the minimum required, and no one ever looked at it again. You took a different approach. You took a proper professional, strategic approach, because not only that, it's not as if they're giving you the money. They're lending you the money. You got to pay it back at some stage. So you've got to be confident, I think, yourself. In the whole idea is going to work with reasonable projections and forecasts. And had you any? It sounds based on your kind of potted CV that you shared so far, you had no past experience in the healthcare sector. No.
Nope. And honestly, it was the biggest advantage going. Wow, because I had no preconceived idea. I went and read the rule book, and I thought, okay, that seems pretty it, and that's how I'm going to run things. So everything was built from scratch. I was buying businesses that needed investment. So there was definitely a need for immediate investment, which meant that the business planning side of things, when it came to acquiring, was the due diligence approach took into account that whole, how much do I have to invest? What's the payback going to be? And I had some really clear targets. But like I say, I mean, I literally walked into an industry that was full of the wife being a nurse. Usually the husband was something ex-military or ex-corporate, semi-retired. Yeah. They hadn't got that running a professional business background. They usually got into it almost by accident. And the fact that they made any money was almost a side thing.
Yeah, it was almost, in some cases, a sort of semi-retirement hobby. They'd had a bit of money, or they had a private pension or something. It wasn't perhaps seen. It's kind of a cottage industry, wasn't it? And I know a lot of other industries historically are that. They don't necessarily, historically at least, apply the same level of rigor and sort of business strategy. And you came in as a sort of fresh-faced young thing and just applied, I guess, standard business models and say, where's our revenue? Where's our costs? Where's our overheads? How can we generate, I mean, relatively basic stuff, I suppose, but when you come in with a fresh set of eyes and a sort of professional strategy, there's opportunities. So I presume that went well. presume?
Oh yes, yeah. I was totally focused on ROI. So the bankers, the investors
Yeah.
were very pleased. We had a dividend policy that meant that the investors wouldn't be expecting a dividend for the first 5 years, but all the profits would be reinvested in growth. And because we set that out right at the very beginning, we had really solid shareholder agreements. We knew what the getting in was, we knew what the operating was, and we also knew what the getting out was. So
Right.
everybody went into that very clear with the journey. And because a number of the investors were of a significant age, only a bit older than I am now, actually, but a lot older than I was way back then.
Sure, yeah.
They were very clear on, if something happens to me whilst I'm invested in it, this is what's going to happen to my shareholding, etc. And that, starting with the end in mind, made the buy-in for the investment really easy. It was just easy to explain.
Again, I find this super interesting as well. It's just the clarity of vision that it sounds like you had right from the beginning. So all your stakeholders, from the lenders to the investors, everyone, including yourself as a founder, were quite clear how it was going to operate, what the dividend policy was, and crucially, and we want to sort of really dig deep into this over the next sort of few minutes or so, the exit strategy, because that's often just left. No one really said, well, look, we'll just see how it goes. So this was a business that sounds, well, there was clarity around the exit strategy. Did you build it knowing that at some stage there would be liquidity for those investors, and you'd look to sell or merge or get out at some stage? Is that what you went in from the beginning with that view?
So because we had multiple investors who were all at different stages of life, we made it very easy for different people to get in and get out.
Right.
So it was easy. If you wanted to get out, then there was a clear hierarchy of how you did that and how the business was valued, etc. Because I actually extricated myself from that business after about 3.5 years, and
carried on running it.
No.
Oh, you mean you got yourself out completely?
I made the wisest decision I have ever made.
Okay, tell us about that then.
I went and found an MD who I had worked with previously, and I had always thought, from the minute I met this woman, I always thought, if I ever run a business, I want you in it. Right. And I'd had several conversations with her. It wasn't quite such an easy sell, but I knew that at some point I would want her in, and I definitely wasn't ever going to be a forever person. So the one thing that's good about me, it's one of my unique skills, is I'm really good at getting things going, but I am not so good at doing the ticking over. Anytime anything is just ticking over, I start chewing the furniture.
You start looking for the exit door. Okay.
Yes.
So you managed to get some sort of exit, so you were able to cash out and sell to other stakeholders, shareholders.
Yes,
because that's often is the challenge, isn't it, in a privately held business, is lack of liquidity or be able to sell shares. But again, it sounds like you got that right from the beginning. You knew there was off ramps for people, because not everyone wants to stay to the very end on a complete sell and exit. Yeah,
absolutely. And the age range of our investors was, I think, something like 40 years.
Wow.
So,
okay.
We were really clear, and then you never know what's going to happen. So everybody thinks, I'm going to plan this exit and my life is going to go perfectly. But how many people who've been knocked off a bike or diagnosed with cancer, had their partner or actually even themselves die unexpectedly, particularly well before they were thinking that it might happen? And so these things come along and it's real life. Those things are real life.
They are.
And
Absolutely.
You need your business to be prepared. And one of the things that really drives me and has driven me for a long time is, one of my earliest clients when I started working independently was a guy that I was working on this kind of succession planning with. And we were literally like less than a month in, and he was up a ladder clearing out some gutterings. It's so mundane. But he fell off the ladder, and a week later he was dead. Oh. Now, that's a tragedy in itself. But the second tragedy is that his 10 million turnover business that employed nearly 100 people, because there was no succession plan, and clearly no exit plan. 18 months later, that business was insolvent. And that
Wow.
was,
Yeah.
it was being bought as an asset strip, and 100 people had to go and find jobs elsewhere. And that was almost a bigger tragedy, because everything that he'd worked for
Yeah.
to build up, then literally just it faded away.
It is absolutely tragic, and it's something I see on a regular basis. Business owners have got there's a certain amount. There's an optimistic outlook that comes with being a business owner, because you have to, as a startup or a founder, an entrepreneur, you have to be optimistic and you have to be resilient, because we all know that it's a roller coaster ride. There's bullets flying left, right, and center, and so therefore that can sometimes lead itself to say, well, I'll be fine. Nothing will ever happen to me. I should be, I'll see this through to the end. I'll sell, or some sort of financial reward will come my way. But sometimes life happens, or sadly in this case death happens, and if you're unprepared for it, it is, and as you say, it's the years and years of effort that kind of go through a just a tragic accident that happens. So I find this is kind of I think, as the original idea of this podcast is because in my day job I just always spent a lot of time speaking with business owners and entrepreneurs, and they were just great storytellers. And it would certainly be some great stories to tell. There'd be some tragic stories to tell. And as I say, the ups and downs. And I've often felt that's why I got started. I'd love to just, put a microphone in front of a few of these people, including you, and share some of the stories such that others can learn from it and maybe take some steps and some actions themselves, either to enhance their current situation or at least to protect their situation. I mean, I know that you've said, I was looking at your website before, the role that you do now, you say it's more than a job, it's your life's mission. I mean, yes. So why are you so passionate about helping entrepreneurs?
I think it's because you work so hard to create value. And if you think about it, typically you might start out on your own, and your first job is get your first customer, and then your second job is getting the first customer to pay. And then once you've got more than one or two customers, and you might start thinking about employing a member of staff, and you usually leave that too late. And so, but you're all constantly making these decisions that ultimately go towards generating value for the business, wealth for yourself and your employees. And that generating wealth, it's like generating energy. It's really hard work. Yeah. Some people just hit a vein and get, and I'm going to say lucky, because I think lucky is where perspiration and inspiration and opportunity all meet. Yeah. But you create that value. And then the saddest thing I ever hear is when someone says, "Oh, I'm not taking on any new clients now. I'm gonna let the other ones that I've got slowly drift away because I'm sliding into my retirement." Yeah. Thinking, you spent 20 years scrapping around for every one of those clients. Why would you not consider taking that value and passing it on to the next generation in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah, exactly. I can see that, and clearly, from what you've shared so far, you personally have been at the coalface, and you've helped other businesses in your early days. You've sort of founded and created and exited businesses in the past, and we'll explore further about kind of your day job and what you do now, and this kind of inspiring role that you've performed. But I think, again, the other thing about this kind of platform and this podcast is that I remember a couple of years ago, just looking around, there is no shortage of information, podcasts, YouTube videos, you name it, about startups. Startup is a sexy thing, isn't it? How do you launch a startup? How do you get going? Even the phrase, how do you raise money and speak to angel investors and VC investors and all those sort of conversations. But honestly, there's very little about the strategic exit, a successful exit, and actually both sides of that. And I was always fascinated in the human journey, which I'd love to explore with you a bit more as well, because behind all these businesses, successful or otherwise, are human beings and families and sort of all the natural ups and downs of that. And I was just really interested, hence wanting to create a platform we could discuss more the kind of the sort of towards the end of the journey, as opposed to the first year or two, because I think that's pretty well covered. As I said, have you heard the phrase, I think it's Wobo Poco? It was it's another way. I said to a guy, I read it somewhere online a few years ago, and Sometimes you speak to business owners and they say, well, I'm never leaving the business. I've got no plans, love it. I'm going to carry on. And the wobble poker basically stands for, you are leaving your business one day. You're either going to walk out, be bought out, be pushed out, or be carried out. You are leaving. Yes. One day you are leaving. Even if you sort of, you have to get carried out in a box, you're going to be leaving this business. Of those four options, being bought out successfully, ideally for a sort of life-changing transformational sum of money, would seem the preferred route, as opposed to the others being pushed out or just walking out. And I've noticed, and again, you quote them before, I've seen it on your website, there are some worrying statistics. I'm going to quote a couple of them. 90% of SMEs are unsellable. 50% just close their doors, like walk out. Just we've given ourselves a job for a few years. We're just going to lock the doors, close it down, and walk away for zero value. And this is a statistic I found astounding and worrying. Only 1 in 2,000 sell for full market value.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's a huge question, and maybe we'll break it down into different parts. But why is that? Why is there so many people start with great ideas? I don't think everyone starts with a view of, I'm going to sell out for millions, but to create, I honestly think that creating economic security is a part of the role. It's not necessarily the only thing. People are often inspired to change the world or do, make a better mousetrap or whatever it might be. But you can't ignore the financial side of things as well. And the numbers, 1 in 2,000 sell for decent full market value. So where are we all going wrong? Why are the numbers so appallingly poor? What do you think, Christy?
I would say the number one thing is that nobody or very few people prepare. Right. So people always say to me, when's the best time to start exit and succession planning? And so actually, when you start planning your business in the first place, start with the end in mind. Why are you building this? What are you doing? Because a lot of business owners start their business and they do it on the basis of, well, it's just me and I'm competing with some bigger boys, and therefore I'm going to compete on price because I don't have the overhead. What? If you're producing the same value, it doesn't matter. Your clients don't care what the overhead is. What they care about is what they get. Yeah. So they start with a very poor business model. And then it just goes downhill from there, because they're scrapping around for customers. Everything relies on them, and especially those people who say, well, I'm never leaving my business. There's only two reasons to say that. It's, I love it so much, I'm literally going to go out horizontal. Yeah. Or I can't even imagine how the business would survive for one day if I'm not here. Yeah. And unfortunately, mostly it's that latter one. They literally can't hand anything over because they're so poor at delegating, because psychologically their financial security is tied up in the business. And what they don't realize is that actually the more they work in their business, the less their business is worth, and they are literally destroying their financial security by making themselves the center of it. So the number one is not actually thinking about the end in mind right at the beginning. The number two is then not doing anything at all to prepare. And then I think the third one is a poor business model. And a lot of my clients, one of the things that we have to do is we have to really look at their business model. And I would say 9 out of 10 people that I speak to, with the conversation being, could I become a client? 9 out of 10 of those conversations are, you need to go away and do this piece of work first before I can add any value. There's no point. You can sign up for me, you can pay me some money, but you know what? You're not going to get where you want to get unless you've done this.
There's some basic things, some basics to get fixed now before you start talking about some of the bigger issues and challenges. So, I mean, talk us through that. What are the kind of, let's imagine someone's listening to this and they're thinking, look, I do want an exit. I don't want to carry on doing this forever. Maybe I'm 2 to 5 years away from what I naturally think. So what are the, break down sort of what are the key areas to begin to focus on specifically? What actions are there that people should actually start to think about and then start to do?
So particularly if you are going to, and I'm going to use the word sell your business.
Yeah.
But by that I mean transfer the ownership of your business.
Yes.
There's three really key things. One is, and this is how I introduce what I do to people, is get out of the day-to-day. So I help business owners get out of the day-to-day.
Yeah.
So that they can then build a roadmap to hand over control, so that they can finally, in the third stage, sit in the seat of a shareholder, so that when the transaction comes along, that they are focused in their position as a shareholder to go through the transaction. Because one of the single biggest reasons why business sales fail or are at significantly reduced value is because the poor old business owner, usually the founder, is trying to balance three jobs. They've got a job, they are a director, and they're a shareholder.
Yeah.
And when you're directing the business and you've got a day job and you're trying to do a transition transaction, you are now distracted.
Yeah.
And you're not going to do any one of those things to 100%. And something's going to give. And actually, usually it's everything that gives. So everything then comes down. Your performance is less than it could be. The transaction and transition transaction, no matter how that is structured, it is a roller coaster.
Yep.
It's emotionally demanding. It's physically demanding. I guarantee two things. Every business owner says, what on earth do they want to know that for?
Yeah.
And then usually a bit not too far after they've said that question, they say, oh my God, when's this going to end?
Yeah.
With all that drama. And
Yeah.
then
yeah. Sorry, go on.
So by then, any buyer who's identified any potential risks that weren't particularly obvious right at the beginning of the transaction can start picking away at the price.
Yeah.
And the business owner is less resilient, less mentally resilient, and they're physically tired. So they start giving away things that at the beginning of the process would have been a red line.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard this described as deal fatigue. You're just saying, just get this over with. And I think that's something people just don't think about it, because before you enter this, and I've been party to a number of people who've gone through, I've spent some time myself in it, both sides of it, buying and selling. And it is just draining. I'm talking about pretty small transactions, pretty small deals, but it is, you don't, unless you've done it before, it's very hard to anticipate those, just the physical toll that it takes on your body, the kind of the sleepless nights that you inevitably have, and the kind of relentless request, and dealing with all due respect to our friends in the legal profession, dealing with lawyers and the nitpicking of asking, as you say, for more and more information and saying, oh my God. And 6 months into it, you just say, no, for Christ's sake, I want this to end. And you're right. And then you lack resilience, and you can probably give up on some of the valuation and the expected price. And so I think that's really, really good advice. So in other words, you really need to get yourself into a shape whereby you're just acting as a shareholder, ready to sell the shares of this organization, and you've got the other hats that you've been wearing historically in the business. You need to have other people take responsibility for those, so you can be fully present. And that's the only thing you're doing for. And this can go on for months and months and months, a sale transaction, can't it? Yeah. And I think, and that's the point. If you're doing your day job, and most founders are just pretty busy anyway. There's not as if they're sort of spending their time twiddling their thumbs. They're busy before they start, dealing with a transaction and all the legal work. And you try to fit that in on top and everything else that you're trying to do. No, that's a recipe for disaster. So I think that's super advice right from the beginning, in terms of just prepare. And if it takes you a couple of years to prepare for these various roles and handing them across, what else should they be thinking about?
Well, talking to you, it makes this an obvious thing, but a lot of people go into selling their business without thinking about what they're going to do with the money. But they also don't even think about the value of their business. So I often have conversations where people go, want to sell my business. And I said, how much do you think you want to sell it for? And there's two numbers that always come up, 5 million and 30 million. And I do not know where those numbers come from. but they're the two most common numbers. It used to be 1 million and 10 million, but now it's
All right. Inflation's taking place, so it's 5 and 30
5
out
and
of out of
30.
out of nowhere. There's just a sort of a
Yeah,
thumb in the
yeah,
air,
yeah.
and just
It is
yeah,
literally, a
yeah,
number that they look at because it's a nice, sexy looking number. But then I always say to them, well, how much do you need?
yeah,
If because a significant number of business owners are relying on the sale of their business to fund their retirement,
yeah,
but they have no idea they haven't thought about what retirement looks like. And typically, I've heard some numbers thrown around, but if you want to go from being in business and have a really exciting, do as you will kind of
yeah,
retirement, I'm not talking about really extravagant, but,
yeah,
being able to just jump on a plane
yeah.
for, and snowbird for the winter,
Mm,
that lifestyle typically costs 165% of what your normal lifestyle costs.
right. Mm,
So your expenses would expect to go up. Most people think in their heads, well, I'll have paid my mortgage off, my expenses
yeah,
will go down. But they actually don't know what their number is. So they don't know what they need, and
mm,
then they don't know what they want. And those two numbers are very different.
yeah,
And then, of course, whatever those two numbers actually happen to be, it bears no resemblance to the value of their
yeah.
business. And because they don't know what the value of their business is now,
Mm,
they have no idea what they need to build it to. So there's a couple of examples of this is where one of my clients wanted to sell their business, but figured that she probably needed to invest another 5 years of growth.
mm-hmm,
But when we sent her to a wealth manager and
mm-hmm,
he looked at, forecast planning, she had
yeah,
another form of income.
yeah,
She also had a husband with a very healthy pension fund. And when he looked at all the scenarios, she could actually sell her business today.
mm,
She didn't need to put another 5 years of effort. And she was
yeah,
already out of love with that business.
yeah.
So selling it today would give her the lifestyle that she wanted straight away. So really, let's just go and look for a buyer.
It's extraordinary,
And
isn't it? And the value to her of 5 years of her life, especially
yeah,
not doing something that she is no longer in love with and free to do within reason, kind of anything she wants, it's
yeah,
extraordinary. And you're right. And yeah, it is sort of part of the role that we play here. But I never cease to be amazed because most successful business owners are smart people. There's no doubt about it. They're hardworking and they're smart, and they tend to know their business pretty well. And they tend to know their forecasts and their sort of profit centers and how they make money and all that. But they don't. It's a classic cobbler's shoes type thing, cobbler's children's shoes,
oh,
in that they don't apply the same discipline to their own circumstances. And you're right. And I don't mean this disrespectfully to business owners, but sometimes I ask similar questions. They say I have no real idea, or as you say, they come up with some magical figure plucked out of nowhere, and you think that's just so random. And often they're either, as you say, they're either there already, or they're nowhere close to it, and depending
yes,
on. But I think having clarity is just really important as well. We talk about that. Just identify your magic number. The magic number is, it doesn't matter what you do with the money within reason, whether you buy property or invest it in stocks or whatever, but something that's going to create a passive income such that working is entirely optional. A lot of people say, I enjoy working. Well, fine, go and do something, but not without perhaps the same level of pressure and sort of relentlessness sometimes of running a business. If you want to carry on doing something, starting a new company, fine, but you're not doing it purely for economic reasons. So you've got to
yeah,
identify what that number is, and it's not overly complex to do it. And as you say, a good financial planner, wealth manager can do it. People can have a go at themselves if they're half decent at Excel, but that I think is a starting point. So you say that's another failing that some people you've spoken to have had, in that they haven't really worked out what's the price they need to be focusing on. Right.
yeah, absolutely. And like you say, they're very blinkered in terms of they haven't really thought that. Well, they're usually so tired at the end of the day by
Yeah.
being dragged into the day to day.
Yeah.
So actually thinking about themselves is sometimes a bit alien. And I've had people in tears. It's like, oh my God, I can't think about this because it's just too difficult. But equally, what can they do within their business to release them from the time and drain of energy to be able to have that clarity of thinking?
Yeah.
And they've usually, if they've got staff, there are two things actually. One of the things that always amazes me is business owners capacity for tolerating mediocrity. And so often they'll, particularly if they've had a few bad hires that have been really difficult, then they will literally tolerate a breathing warm body rather than stick it out for the right
anyone.
people.
Anyone will do.
Yeah.
Bring him in. Yeah.
Now a lot of that is to do with their own behaviour, and I'm going to offend some people now, because typically everything that goes on in your business is absolutely your fault. So if you've got bad behaving employees, it's your fault.
Yeah.
Because you need to expect more of people. But the problem is, even if you get a good hire in, because you haven't done any succession planning and everything is within your control, you become a stranglehold of your business, because let's face it, it's your financial security. Now what you're doing is you're making really good people come to you for every decision. So you're now withering their ability to make decisions. And then you're going, well, why are they always coming to me? Well, you have to look at yourself in the mirror. You're the one that's enabling this. So, I always say that one of the big mistakes that people make is not actually thinking about what their expectation of their people is and how they hand over some of the control. And I am not talking about handing over the keys, actually chucking the keys through the door and disappearing into the sunset. It is a phased thing. Succession planning takes time, but it also takes knocking on the head any tolerance of mediocrity at all. Yeah. And I have a really good, really simple, easy to implement tool that will help you eradicate mediocrity in your business.
Tell us more. So what is this? Is this this is the tool that's available to people? People can use it, or do you mean just okay?
Absolutely. So I use it with just about all of my clients, and it's called "What Does 100% Look Like?" And it's literally how to assess your people's performance role by role on one piece of paper. And the great thing is that if you really go with this, you're going to get, for all of your people, you're going to get one of two results. You're going to get people who are going to underwhelm you and give you the strongest indication that they should be going and working somewhere else.
Yep.
Or you're going to get the other end of thinking, you're going to get completely overwhelmed with, oh my goodness me, this person has greater expectation than I ever would have of them. And let's develop that further. And it's a really good way of figuring out the good people that you've got in your business. It's really quick. And I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's simple. And it's straightforward and easy to implement. But it's mentally and psychologically, it is not easy.
Simple but not easy. Well, I quite like that. I certainly like the simple part of it. But as I'm listening to you speak here, Christine, I'm beginning to form a picture in my mind. This is like a big jigsaw puzzle, really. In fact, it's like a Rubik's cube because it's 3D. There's a lot of moving parts to this, and it's putting the whole thing together because that tool you just talked about speaks to then creating. I mean, when you say succession plan, you mean creating other roles for people that to take it away from what the founder's always been doing, because taking responsibility, which is that in itself is kind of knock-on effect of creating this role whereby the business is less dependent on that one individual, that key man or key woman, the person who started the company, the MD, the founder, the CEO, whatever they are, and it empowers others. But you've got to have the people you're empowering have to be up for the job, I think is the point.
Yes.
They don't necessarily have to do it to the same degree that you were doing, or do it differently. But presumably you've got to let look. I mean, I'm guessing from my knowledge and experience that a business that's entirely dependent on one person isn't worth much, because as soon as that person leaves, how are you going to, who's going to do the work? So that's what you're advocating for. It sounds like, build the team, empower the team, promote the team, get them to do the roles. You got to find the right people who are capable of doing it. And that's part of the overall strategy. Yeah. If I can use the analogy of a teepee or a single pole tent. So if your business is a tent that's relying on one central pole that you hammer into the ground, everything hangs off it.
tent pole falls over, whole thing falls
Yeah.
over, is
Yeah.
collapsing in a snotty mess.
Mm.
So whereas a teepee is multiple poles that lean into a center and they lean on each other.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've got the structure right and you've got enough poles in place, removing one and everything will still work while you then replace that person. So it can cope with gaps. And this is not just about replacing the business owner as the single point of failure, because often what happens is, and this happens so frequently, where the business owner goes, okay, the business can't rely on me, so I'm going to replace me with someone that business will then rely on, that one person. Mm-hmm. And actually what we need to do is diffuse the decision making to the appropriate levels, so that everybody has an accountability. So everybody knows what they have to do. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows what they have to get done. Mm-hmm. And everybody knows what decisions they can make and what the limits of those decisions are, and then where they go to when they've hit their limit of decision making. And now you've gone from a single pole tent to an entire matrix where it like Jenga, you can remove certain things and it still works, it still stands.
Yeah, and if occasionally if somebody chooses to move on, that's fine. You replace the Jenga block, and they can move them out, move them in, but the whole thing doesn't collapse. Is the important thing. Yeah, that all makes perfect sense to me now. So, kind of, are there any other things before we move on to the kind of the actual the transaction and selling and beyond that? Any other things? So we're getting organized and probably sort of empowering other people, making sure you've got the right, as you say, the right sort of seats on the bus, the right people on the seats on the right on the bus, and building the team, delegating work such that the time is freed up, and particularly not just for the sale transaction to focus on being a shareholder, negotiating with a potential buyer, but also just to make the business more valuable. That bottom line, as we already said. Any other thoughts in terms of optimizing a year or two out, to sort of or longer, optimizing for, because someone said, I want to sell, I want to maximize my sale value. It's appropriate. I've done my number. I've worked it out. I've reverse engineered it, and it's quite a big number. so what else do I really need to be focusing on to maximize the value?
So I always say that ultimately it's about getting the right people doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason in your business. So if you've got the right people, that's about the succession plan, the making sure that everything is covered. And if one person disappears, you can fill the hole quickly and easily. So you've got the right people. So now you've got to get them doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. And most businesses work at a better and higher profit with lower overheads if you have processes. Yep. So this is all about your system of delivering to clients. And this is where reliance on the business owner is terrible, because if your clients are constantly saying, yeah, but I only want the boss, because I know he's going to deliver this in a particular way. So you process everything, which means that anybody in your business is now going to do things on a consistent basis. It's always going to be the same. Mm-hmm. It allows you to do two things. One is there's a consistency which improves customer retention. It allows you to do that succession planning where everybody knows what they have to do, what they have to get done, what decisions they can make. So you fit it into that. Yeah. And it also means that you can do continuous improvement, because when something goes wrong, there's only two things that you can look at. Did the process go wrong? Is there something wrong with the process? Or did we not follow the process? So if there's something wrong with the process, we can improve it. But if someone didn't follow the process, again, we go down two routes. Yeah. It's either because I know everything, so I don't need to follow the process. That process doesn't apply to me, or, I'm too senior for all of that. Mm-hmm. Well, that's great, because I'm going to invite you to go and work somewhere where that works. But here we follow the process, because then everybody knows what's going on. Because the second thing is, oh my goodness me, I didn't know there was a process. Yeah. Well, that's a management issue. Train them in the process, then they do the process the next time. it's great. So when you've got a new person coming through, they may not be aware of a particular process.
Yeah.
So if they don't get a decent handover, or if they are parachuted into a role that is has been vacated, they're bound to make a few mistakes. But at least the process works when they're aware of it.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. There are too many businesses, and I include my own, historically, not now, I hasten to add, where it was all in the founder's brain. Just ask me anything, I'll tell you what it is. And that's where it kept. That's where it always, so it was always relying. The founder becomes the biggest bottleneck because nothing gets done unless you've got to ask the question, what do we do about this? And you know the answer and you tell them, but how much better would it be? Just have it. So we're talking about basic documentation of systems and processes, however you do it, whether it's computerized, but there is some sort of format that exists that if somebody forgets because you haven't done that particular process for a couple of weeks or months, oh yeah, that's how we do it, I'll go back because it's been thought of. And as you say, I think really important, processes are designed to be improved just in the light of experience and sort of real engagement with real clients or whatever. You say, actually, there's a tweak we could do this to make this better, faster, a better experience for the customer. I think that makes sense as well. So you're really beginning to sort of formulate quite an exciting business by the sounds of things. You're delegating to other people, use systems and processes in place. The owner, founder is sort of off the tools mainly in terms of more of a kind of strategic role, I think, is what you say, more of this kind of visionary type role, strategic planning, big picture, looking over the horizon, as opposed to just getting their hands dirty day to day. But I think that's an important part. So what about things like timing the sale? Is that sort of just at the whims of markets and things? How important is the timing of it?
Yeah, there's a great TED talk actually. I forget the name of the guy now, but he talked about success factors in startups. And I know we're not talking about startups, but bear with me on this one. But he talked about what the success factors were for businesses, particularly startups. And he looked at some work because they've got good funding or it appears that they've got the right team in place, or that but actually the single biggest factor of any success was timing. He was in, and he didn't go into that expecting that to be the output. His thesis was it's good funding and then getting good people, but actually it turns out that it's actually good timing, good people, then funding. Funding was almost one of the lowest ones.
Yeah, I've watched that. I think the guy's name is Bill Gross. He's a sort of VC legend, Silicon Valley. And I remember someone else pointed that out to me. How surprised they were. They thought it was about the people or the product. No, it was all about time. They tracked some fantastic people with startups that failed because the time wasn't right. And they tracked some great products that failed, the time wasn't right. But the products that really worked, whatever it was, because, I don't know, the world was ready for Airbnb or Uber or whatever it might be, but it wasn't 10 years before or 10 years later, we've been in the wrong time. So I guess what you're saying is the same applies at the other side, on the exit as well. Timing is very important.
And I will caveat that with being ready for when the market is ready is great, because if you haven't actually got a specific time that you're thinking of getting out, so particularly if you're much younger and you know that you're prepared to spend a long time building this, then fine. But actually everybody should be ready as soon as possible. And if you build the readiness in, it's actually easier to build it into your business at the beginning and grow up with it than it is to retrofit fit anything. Yeah. But equally, you can create the timing yourself. You can decide on the timing. And then it's just a matter of having a really good exit strategy and understanding that because you've dictated timing, that your choices, which maybe if the timing wasn't an issue, maybe quite wide ranging, but because timing is a very specific issue, your choices may be narrowed. But that's fine if 80% of any exit planning anyway is the same, no matter what your exit choice is. Yeah. And it's only that last 20% that kind of changes, because selling to PE or selling to trade, similar journeys, not quite identical, different psychologies around them. But equally, a lot of business owners think that the only thing that they can do is sell. And
Yeah.
that's not the only, so it's sell to a third party. But that's actually not the only option that you have. And one of the things that I've been working on much more recently is employee ownership. And so a lot of my clients will come to me and say, I want to sell to my employees, but they haven't got the cash to buy in.
Yeah.
And go, don't worry about that. There is a whole raft of legislation now with a very special way of you selling to your employees where they don't pay you out of their own immediate direct pockets,
Sure.
but you still get the money out at the market rate.
Yeah.
And there are funding options around that too. But when it comes to exit, there are 100 ways to literally skin that cat.
Yeah, lots of different options. So I guess you start with, from the owner's viewpoint, what are they hoping to achieve? Some will want to sell to the next generation or the employees. Some won't. Some want to sell to the highest bidder. Some, there's variations I've heard. I've never been through myself, but I've heard, private equity is an option, but it can be very tough. And strategic buyers can be. So there's a range of options. And so this is again trying to be very specific and offer some practical information and advice to anyone listening to this. With all those options out there, who should they be speaking to? I guess there are, obviously people like you in terms of the business coaching, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but there are specific organizations I'm thinking about, maybe certain size business, investment banks, corporate finance firms, people who arrange they define the buyers, just trying to assemble a team of people. Who are the sort of key players that any business owner might start to at least open conversations with a year or two out from a planned exit?
So I always say to people, at least understand what your options are so that you can understand the journey that is going to be undertaken for each of those options to see which one is going to be palatable to you. And that is something that, this is bread and butter to me.
Right.
Because if you go directly to a corporate finance house or if you go to a broker, they are going to guide you towards the thing that earns them the most fees.
Yeah.
Now, some of them are going to really push you into a particular direction because they're less reputable. But some of them are going to give you the full appraisal of, well, this is where you're at, and I can either deal with you or not, but these are the routes that I'm going to give you. And those routes typically for corporate finance and brokers are selling to either PE, VC, or within the trade, or to a pool of strategic buyers that they might already know or may be willing to research. I will caveat all of that with a warning. There are some brokers, in inverted commas, out there that have got very slick marketing. They will send you letters and fancy documents saying, we will sell your business and we've sold more businesses than anybody else. The thing to ask there is, you might have sold more businesses, but how many businesses did you have on the books? And you'll find that their success rate is almost single figures. So if you know that you want to sell to a third party and you don't know who that is, and I'll also suggest that 90% of all businesses that are saleable already know who their buyer is.
Okay,
they might not have thought of it in these terms, but they will already have an existing relationship, either through the trade, through the industry, through networks. When a buyer comes knocking, by whatever means, whether it's unsolicited or whether you've engaged a corporate finance or a broker to go and get you on, you will not be surprised by your buyer. So
that's interesting. I hadn't heard that before, but I can understand that. Most sectors, most industries are kind of quite intimate in a way. Most people sort of know each other or have heard of each other, whether you're in butcher, baker, candlestick maker, you kind of know. If you ever go to the conferences or read the trade magazines and things, you kind of know. Obviously, That's an interesting point I hadn't thought of. It's not as if a buyer necessarily, it might happen, but they come completely out of the blue, never heard of them before. So you, as you say, you may already know them. You may wish to nurture a relationship. Another thing that struck me when you said that, and again, I've been somewhat on. I guess you've got plenty of experience in this in the past yourself, Christine. Somewhat on the end of the receiving end of this, as a business owner, on a regular basis, I get contacted. Do you want to sell your business? And we've all got egos, and some of the language that's used is very flattering. You've got an outstanding business, and we can say, "Oh, this sounds wonderful." You get quite excited about how positive they see your business in the light. And then I've got a couple of other mates who are far more cynical, and they say, yeah, they say that to all the boys and all the girls. Yes, that you're nothing special.
Yeah. Sadly, they do, but that's just good marketing. Yeah. There's one firm in particular that just has spectacular marketing. Yeah. And when you go to one of their workshops, they'll get one of their, either that or they'll get one of their sales guys, and he'll say, put three hours aside because we're going to do a deep dive on your business. Yeah. And they'll come with the most amazing, slick, glossy brochures that even now, because of digital printing, will be personalized. So they'll have all your logo. They'll literally turn up for a 3-hour meeting with your logo and everything that they can find out about you on the internet, all in this. They'll have your vision and mission if it's on your website. They'll know your company's history. They'll have investigated you through Companies House.
I mean, that's very appealing, isn't it? Very appealing to a business owner to say, I can't believe these people put this much time and attention, but it's very much worth it from them. We're not for a second saying everyone's like this. There are some outstanding professionals working in that sector, but I get it. There's a lot of money involved. There's commissions, and when companies are sold for millions of pounds, tens of millions and more in some cases, there's a lot of money flying around. So probably there's enough budget for a pretty slick marketing strategy that gets deployed. So what you're saying is kind of just be wary. And I think the key thing here, Christine, is to seek counsel, seek advice from those, not necessarily to go direct to those organizations who have got a vested interest. Let's be clear about it, in you following one particular path or the other, knowing there is a wide range, as you said, hundreds of different ranges of or options available, from, as you said, selling, succession planning, selling it to existing employees, selling to any number of people, part selling, all those other things. So seek somebody like yourself who can give a more impartial view and sort of outline the options. And then once you're quite clear on what the options might be, then by all means sort of follow that path and look to identify who are the important companies to speak to.
Yeah, I think the most important there is whoever you speak to, just think about what their vested interest is. Quite. Because I often get people saying to me, "Oh, you've got a great business. It must be really exciting. You must charge a percentage." No. Why would I? Because I want to be able to say to people, "These are the choices that you've got." I don't want to be able to say to them, "Yeah, but if you sell, I get a percentage of that." Because that makes me less than independent. I'm interested in you as a business owner, getting what you want out of your business, so that your business starts serving you and you stop being a slave. Yeah. You're the master, not the slave. And the second thing is that everybody's exit is going to be different depending on what their requirements are. And those requirements might change. Things change. So we want to make sure that you're going to go down the path that is appropriate for you at whatever time you're traveling at it. And I don't want to ever feel like I have to second guess. "Ooh, if I tell them that, then I won't get my fee." And I can guarantee that everyone else who is working on that percentage basis, and there are a couple of things to also look out for, which is some brokers say, "Well, we'll charge you this monthly fee while you're on our books, and then we'll charge you a success fee." But actually, their business model is they make all their money on the monthly fee. So you can be on the hook for 18 months and they won't even have a buyer. And I'm not saying that they're not looking for a buyer, by the way, because they will be looking. Yeah. But there ain't a buyer out there because your business is unsellable. But they're never going to say to you, your business is unsellable, because where's the money in that? Whereas it's one of the most heartbreaking things I have to do, and I have to do it a lot. I speak to potential client and I have to say to them, currently your business is unsellable, and here's the things that you have to do to make it saleable. Now,
But that's I think that's good though. That's tough love, because otherwise they're going down a route and they're being told, for reasons you've just described, that they potentially can sell the business. They're no doubt being told, listen, it's going to be tough. It's not going to be easy, so we might have to charge you extra for it. But the reality is you probably can't sell it at all. But here's what you need to do over the next 2 years or whatever in order to make it saleable. So I think we're back into this world of kind of start with the end in mind. And, identify what does good look like. Tell me what a life well lived looks like. Tell me 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, depending on how old you are, that sort of thing. Let's put some figures and numbers attached to that. And let's see what does today look like? Well, you've got no chance right now. There's no buyer, sane buyer. But here's what we can do. Here's a strategic plan for 3 years, whatever it might be. And I think that just feels a lot more reassuring, more comforting, and just more truthful, which is, and again, honestly, I don't want to bang on about it too much. One of the reasons I started this podcast is because in my experience, entrepreneurs are not well served by a lot of the organizations that purport to serve them for numbers of different reasons. I don't want to go into it. And there's a lot of fabulous people around that do a great job. But even that point on the fee model, and again, I have to say, and it's a conversation for another time. I could run another entire podcast episode on it. But incentives and fee models and all that sort of stuff. In my business, unlike 99% of our competitors, we charge flat fee retainers. We don't charge percentages because they've got an inherent incentive attached to them. If you do this, I get paid. If you don't, I don't get paid. So therefore, my advice is likely to be that you follow path X or path Y. We're only human and we've all got bills to pay. So I think the ability to kind of remove that as being an issue or a conflict of interest that may exist. Again, don't get me wrong, there are some fantastic organizations that charge their fees in a particular way, and they are 100% full integrity people and organizations. Yeah. But if there's a shred of doubt in the customer, the client, the business, or the entrepreneur's mind, then we ought to do our best to eliminate that. So I'm pleased that you operate in that kind of more a consultative role. You sit on the same side, it sounds like, which is what we aim to do. Sit on the same side of the table as your customer, your client, in this case, the founder. You say, right, here's the options. Or we'll have a grown-up conversation about it. We'll begin to map out what the options are likely to be. Now,
yeah, absolutely.
I just want to. I'm conscious of time. Honestly, I wrote out a load of questions to ask you. I'm barely halfway through. We're not going to have time to go through them all today. I think, honestly, Christine, we'll have to have a part 2 another time. Because this is just, it's so on point for what I'm trying to talk about, what we're the message, the information we're trying to share for all those kind of, all those founders and entrepreneurs out there who sort of, who tune into this and looking for a few nuggets of wisdom. But a couple of points I do want to just explore with you. Now, you've worked with business owners through the entire kind of business arc, from early stage through growing, success, getting your sort of ducks in a row, as it were, preparing for exit, and successful sales and exits. So a couple of points I want to ask you that. Number one, I've read before, and I read some of the stuff about you online. There's a number of different real life stories, but there was one company that specifically I picked out that had, you got them a huge multiple on where the business was originally valued at. I think the number is 10 or 11 times what the original valuation was. If you were to summarize that in a few moments, probably a lot of the things we've already talked about, you fixed those, or you helped to fix those. But what were the key components? I know that's a bit of an outlier, but how do you 10x a business valuation? What sort of things would you do in order to get close to that?
Well, in that specific incident, the key thing was, so this was a software company that also built hardware. So it was a product company that had a software element to it, but it was very product driven. And one of the principal things that we did was we actually changed the sale process, because we were bleeding edge. There was a temptation by the sales guys to always sell the next thing that was coming through the pipeline of development and completely forget what was currently available. So we instigated sell what's available now, SWAN. And so we then said, well, how do we make what's available now very valuable to our current customers, when the current customers always wanted to be at the bleeding edge? So one of the key things that we had there was we actually tied our customers in to, well, you can have it today, and then for a small additional fee, we'll take the old one off you and give you a new one. And which meant that they were always paying a top up for particularly the hardware. I mean, software is push a button,
Yeah.
but hardware meant that, you know, we were having to ship things. Now we would be shipping these things in 45 kilo pelly cases, so they were a heavy lump of metal. But it was great because if we're selling the new thing and the old thing is coming back, then actually we recycle that. Okay. So pulling the client in closer and tying them into using our technology so that they were always upgrading our technology meant that they didn't go anywhere else. That made the customers incredibly sticky, incredibly sticky. And then having a pipeline of next developments that was customer driven. So when I joined the company, the product development roadmap was whatever the techie guys thought that it would be fun to have. Yeah. And we actually went straight away to the customers, because the sales guys came and said, we've got this massive pipeline, you know, it's millions of pounds long. Actually, when we dug into it, and I can be assertive when digging into sales smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
And then actually what we figured out that the sales pipeline was 400 grand. We had an order book of 400 grand and that wasn't going to cut it. So we actually went to our customers and said, why aren't you buying from us? And they said, because we're waiting for this next thing.
Right.
And I said, well, I know you're waiting for the next thing, but what apart from what we've told you the next thing should be, what would you really like in there? And they then built the roadmap of product development for us. And some of it was just stupid. Like one customer had a budget, about £1 million, that they weren't spending because our equipment didn't have the equivalent of a big red button that just said stop. 15 minutes later, big red button written into the software, it's on the screen, press stop, everything stops in a nanosecond, customer spends £1 million. Ta-da!
There we go. That right there, that's a breakthrough idea. Guess what? Ask your customers what they want, what they would like you to develop or build or deliver to them. It's it's a new one, but it's worth trying. Ask your customers.
I'm always amazed that you know, I even said to a completely different business, and I said, when was the last time you asked your customers what they wanted or what they thought about you? And the guy said, oh, can't do that because I might not like what they have to say. I'm like,
classic. Yeah, I don't want to hear it. No, for sure. Your customers are the greatest source of ideas and inspiration, creativity, and of course, profit in the future. You build what they want. And so that it was obviously there was a lot more to it than that, but you effectively kind of re-engineered the business in terms of what it delivered, what its sort of profitability, and building this stickiness, the recurring revenue side of it. It sounds like, and really building things that the customers wanted. So presumably profits increase. The whole proposition just over time. This wouldn't have happened overnight, but over time, it's just a different business that's then going to be sold than the one historically, and that's
absolutely. But I have to say, the timeline for that change, 18 months.
Oh, really? So it's pretty fast.
It can really happen really, really quickly.
Yeah. And what was it? It was like 11 times the original valuation.
It was 12 times.
12 times. Sorry, underestimated. But 12. How to 12 times your business valuation in 18 months. There we go. Speak to Christine; she'll sort you out. I'm sure that. Yeah. That's. But there'll be other stories. I'm sure. But it takes some strategic planning and some creative thinking, and I'm all for this. Is another aspect that I think for one way or another for hiring good professionals, because let's face it, we are also wrapped up in our own businesses that we can't see the wood for the trees, and to have somebody come in with an objective view from the outside with business experience, particularly if they've worked with other businesses, somewhat similar to your own, might not be exactly the same, might not even be the same industry, but the same kind of. I think you've said a version of this before, but most businesses are kind of 80% similar in terms of, they've got a good or a product or a service that they create and manufacture, or they deliver. It costs them something to create it. Hopefully it offers value to some community, some customers, some people, and they deliver it at a profit, and all the rest then is the detail. So if you're able to engage with somebody who has got lots of experience that can provide that objective view, particularly if you begin to get clarity about where when the rubber hits the road on planning to sell and exit, that's when the world gets pretty serious then. There was another guy I had on the podcast, you might have heard of him, Henry Dimbleby, who started as a co-founder of the Leon food chain, fast food chain.
Yeah.
And Henry, I know Henry quite well, and he said it's incredible after 10 years, 20 years of all the blood, sweat, and tears of a business, where everything really comes down to really a few months of this negotiation around the sale and exit, and getting that. Obviously, you've got to get everything done prior to that. But then, how you show up for these meetings, how you negotiate, what you do, it can, it's public information what they sold for, but it literally makes millions of pounds worth of difference. And it comes down to literally, in his case, I think he said a few days is what it really came to. So, but the best way to prepare for those few days, weeks or months is to do the work, as you said, literally years out, if you can, if you've got the time to be able to do that. So this has been fabulous so far. Really, really enjoyed the conversation. What's been particularly useful, I think, is you've been really practical. We've gone from the kind of high level, strategic, nice conversations, somewhat into the weeds of specifics and what people ought to do. You mentioned a tool that you've got, and of course, we'll post a link to your website, because I know there are some other. There's a way of sort of there's a scorecard, or there's some facility. I had a look at it earlier today. Christine, tell us a little bit more about that.
So one of the things that I realized was that there's kind of 5 things that people really need to focus on if they're just starting to think about it, because nobody wakes up and goes, "Oh, I just need a bit of good succession and exit advice today."
No, right.
It's usually a bit of a slow burn. So if you do go and look at my website. So my website is christinenicholson.co.uk, and you can do the quiz from there, or you can just go straight to the quiz, getexitready.co.uk, and it literally in 4 minutes you answer less than 20 questions, and it throws out a personalized report for you, telling you exactly according to your circumstances and your answers what you need to do to start thinking about to start your exit readiness journey. And people who say, "Well, I'm not thinking of exiting now," it doesn't matter when you exit. Getting ready, you can never start too soon.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as we already said, whether you believe it or not, you're leaving your business one day. So at least let's begin to build the framework. So that's a lovely resource and a good tool. So we'll certainly post a link to that. So anyone listening can just jump on your website in 4 minutes, get their sort of exit ready report, see how they are, see how they're shaping up, and either do nothing about it, but they're better informed, or begin to take some steps in order to sort of to improve their circumstances. So that's really helpful. Really appreciate you sharing that. Last couple of questions, if I may, before we wrap up for today, Christine. Other than that, and that's a brilliant resource for people, what other resources have you found helpful, or that you perhaps shared with other customers or clients you've dealt with in the past along that entrepreneurial journey? Are there any books or videos or anything that you found to be helpful that others have found helpful?
Okay, I'm going to do one slightly unusual one and then one less unusual one. So a book that I highly recommend, and I give it to a lot of potential clients who are just starting to employ staff, or some of my bigger clients who are bringing in graduates or school leavers. And it's called Business Made Simple by Donald Miller. And whilst it's good for you as a business owner to read it only because then you know what to expect. But I give this book out to every single new employee. So if I go in and work with a client, they're bringing in new employees, this book will be handed to every new employee.
Okay.
And it's because it starts off with how to become a value-driven professional. So business owners, you learn what to expect. New employee, you learn what's going to be expected of you. So that's the first one.
That's great.
And the second one, which is a bit off the wall, is go onto YouTube and search for John Cleese creativity and management. And there's a 45-minute YouTube video there of John Cleese in the early 90s. It's quite dated, but it just talks about the 5 things that are really needed for creative thinking. And this is about finding a space so that you can have the clarity, so you can start thinking about where you want to be, where you want your business to be. And it's just a fabulous 45 minutes. It's been transcribed into a book called John Cleese on Creativity.
Mm.
And this is a book that I hand out like Smarties to people, because it was a game changer for me. And I think it'll be a game changer for most other people, particularly if you are really busy or have some kind of chaos going on in your business. This 45 minutes will change things for you.
Fabulous. I love that. I have to say, I read a lot of books, but not everyone does. I sort of encourage people to, have you read this? Have you read that? And just some people just don't love reading books for whatever reason. But most of us will happily sit down and watch a video. And certainly, I mean, most people love John Cleese, highly entertaining over the years. And that sounds like a great video, worth 45 minutes of anyone's time. I know he has done sort of management and training videos in the past, quite a few years ago, and he's very talented at communication, isn't he? And getting a point across. I, for one, will certainly be looking that out, and I'll post a link to that, of course, in the show notes as well. And people should invest the time to watch that video, and also to read the book, the Donald Miller book. I followed him a bit as well in the past. He's talented. He's done a lot about the he's
just a joy. He's like Cleese. Different approach, but an expert communicator.
He really is,
and a lovely human being.
Yeah, sounds good. So thank you so much for that. So I'm going to throw the last question at you. Always is a little bit of a curveball, but it's really just to try to understand that you've had a high degree of success yourself, professionally. You've worked with people. We've said right from the beginning, most people that we know don't go into business solely to make money and create wealth. It is a byproduct, but it's nevertheless is an important part. But it might not always necessarily be just about money. So I want to ask you about the concept of true wealth, and what does true wealth mean to you, Christine?
For me, it's impact. So what is and I'll reframe that. Positive impact. What's the positive impact that I am making on me, my immediate social family circle, my immediate community, and then the world? And the reason why I say most importantly it starts off with me is because if you don't look after yourself, it's that whole classic, put the oxygen mask on yourself first.
Absolutely.
So, it's really about deciding the impact that you want to make. And you know what? If the impact you want to make is be mega, mega rich so that you can choose how you spend that money, that's fine. Yeah. But it's really all about impact.
Impact. That's fabulous. I love it. And I think that there's a common theme again. Most of the founders that I know and business owners, they do want to. Some of them articulate it, very vocally, and some don't. Some you got to sort of scratch beneath the surface. But it is about impact. Most people do this. And let's face it, starting your own business is just tough. As the saying goes, you end up working twice the hours for half the money, and you've got the worst boss in the world, meaning yourself. But there often is a driving force behind it, and it's a version of impact. They've got a vision. They just want to make the world a better place. And as you rightly say, it starts with yourself. It starts with your immediate circle and your family, and then your community, and then hopefully to the broader population, and ultimately to the world. So I think that's lovely. I think it's a lovely and simple and effective way of describing what true wealth really is. To you, Christine, all about making an impact. So for now, Christine Nicholson, thank you so much for your time and for your insight and your nuggets of wisdom. It's been a fabulous conversation. Thank you for joining us today, and look forward to speaking to you again sometime.
Thank you.